There is breaking news at this hour at 9 o'clock. CBS News is now projecting that Democratic Governor Andy Beshear will be reelected for a second term. Anthony Salvanto has more insight on how Governor Beshear won. Anthony?
Hey there, Nora. So the projection came when we got the votes out of Louisville. Now, it's a Democratic area. He had to do well there. He did. But when you look at this map, you see all the blue and tell the story in three parts. The first one is up here in these suburbs, or really sort of suburbs of Cincinnati. Democrats don't typically do well up there, but Beshear did. The second part of this is over here towards the western part of the state as we get out past Louisville toward Bowling Green. Again, another area Democrats don't typically do well, but a lot of people gave Beshear credit for how he's handled natural disasters. That may have been in play there. And then the other part around here, Frankfort and Lexington, these are all blue. If I showed you by comparison, let's say the Donald Trump win in 2020, you get a lot of red. So when people ask the political question, can a Democrat win in a red state? This is the pattern for how you do it. And, you know, people may try to follow his lead because that's a lot of blue changed over from red, Nora.
Anthony Salvanto, thank you. Ed, I know you've been covering these races closely. How did he do it?
I got to wonder how soon the White House calls him tomorrow and says, so how'd you do it? Because if you're flipping that many red counties blue, there are lessons to be learned not only at the national level for the president, but maybe for Senate candidates like John Tester in Montana or Sherrod Brown in neighboring Ohio. House candidates across the country are going to want to know what he did. What he did is he ran on his record. Economic improvement, infrastructure spending coming into the state, handled the pandemic well enough in a way that Kentuckians said, you know what, I'm willing to give him another 4 years. And the attacks from Daniel Cameron, especially in the closing weeks, that Andy Beshear as a Joe Biden Democrat didn't stick. Probably didn't stick because the Beshear name in Kentucky is so strong. His father had been governor, and he himself has developed a reputation separate and apart from the president, even though sometimes they've had to tour disaster areas together. And that should be a signal, a warning sign to Republicans as well, that with certain Democrats, at least the popular ones or the moderate ones, that kind of an attack may not work.
I want to bring in our Democratic strategist, Joel Payne, and Republican strategist, Terry Sullivan, on this. And what does this victory by Governor Beshear mean?
Well, I think Ed makes a very good point. The Beshear name is so strong in Kentucky, and it's funny, he was almost able to isolate himself from the national environment that Democrats are operating in. It's a complicated story because he's a pro-life Democrat, but he does support protections for the woman in case of rape and incest and health of the mother. So I don't know if that lesson can necessarily be learned nationally by Democrats, but I think what it shows is that a strong Democratic brand, even in this environment, who's trusted with voters in their state, can be successful.
Yeah, look, I think that Ed was right. That this, candidates matter. He's a strong candidate. Frankly, in many states, he'd be a Republican. He's pro-life. He's pro-gun. So I don't think there's anything that national Democrats can learn from him other than maybe to become more conservative. And that's the path to win in a state like Kentucky.
Nora, I've also been talking to folks on the ground in Kentucky, and they just said he outperformed his 19 numbers in so many parts. I know the numbers are still coming in, but they've just been amazed. Even in those flood counties, in kind of some of the more dispersed parts of the state, Beshear's numbers are going to look really strong after tonight.
Thanks to both of you. I mean, we were on the ground in Mayfield, Kentucky, when that town was just wiped out in December 2021. We went to one of the press conferences where I can remember him getting very emotional. And I thought, this guy has an amazing connection with the people of, Kentucky. The way he empathized with people, reached out to many of the victims of that terrible, terrible tornado that really wiped out the parts. And then in terms of policies, we were just reading up on this, he's getting credit for in the press of extricating the Biden from Bidenomics, by essentially campaigning on that major bridge project that you mentioned, the infrastructure law, by talking about the 2 best years for economic development in our history, job growth in the state of Kentucky. And there has been job growth nationally as well, but the president's not getting any credit for it. But here's a Democratic governor who's managed to get some credit for it.
Yeah, and governors often do. It's easier for them to run on a strong economy because the voter feels it more and feels that connection closer. And he may be now one of the last incumbents to win re-election post-pandemic. But we were talking earlier today here on the streaming network with Congressman Morgan McGarvey from the Louisville area, who said, voters remember that during that pandemic, 5 o'clock every day he was on the news. He said, I had voters who were calling it Beers with Beshear because they knew that every day he'd be there talking about this and talking straight about it.